Hello everybody, I hope everyone's doing great. I am doing a demo today about the pen tool. We're going to cover all the basics, and this is for Adobe Illustrator. This can actually be used for a number of my classes. The one class in particular that will find it helpful in Module 3 is COM 230. COM 229 will also use this demonstration. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my Illustrator. I'm going to go to File, New. Okay, I'm going to do a custom size document, 6 inches. You can change this by 6 inches. Orientation doesn't matter in this case, simply because it's a square object. I'm going to use a single artboard. I'm going to use CMYK color. I'm going to keep my PPI at 300. And I hit create. Okay, so this creates a new artboard. I can zoom in and out on my artboard over here using my navigator window. Remember, all the windows that I have open here, this is unique to how I work, but you can open any of your windows by going here and clicking on the one that you want to see. Okay, these are just the ones that I tend to keep open because they're the ones that I use the most often. Okay, in my artboard window, it shows that I have a single artboard. If I want to create a second artboard for a second document, perhaps a series of symbols that I'm creating, this would be particular to Mod 3 assignment in COM 230. Okay, but I can create multiple artboards that are identical at this stage. Okay, I also have my layers palette open because I will be using layers. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete this because it's just extra information on the screen we don't need right now. I will not be using character. I could close them, but I'm just used to having them open. I got swatches, strokes, gradient, my color guide, brush strokes. Like I said, I always have Navigator open, and I really like my Align and Transform Pathfinder tools open. So those are the ones I like. You'll also see that I have some tools pulled out here. Any of these tools that have this tiny little triangle in the bottom corner indicates that there are subtools underneath it. So in this case, it's the pen tool. So if I just click and hold on that, you see the 4 pen tools. And if I come over here, I can tear off this little mini menu, and I keep that open all the time too. Once you've decided how you like your screen to look when you're working, you are welcome to go up to Workspace, and you can save a new workspace. You can reset it. You can choose one of the ones that is pre-arranged for you. The one that I use is similar to Layout, but you can also just name it your own workspace, and then you can always go back to it if things get messed up and you're not happy with how it's looking. Okay. All right, so we are starting with a document, 6 by 6 square. I'm going to be using the idea or the concept from the Module 3 pen tool exercise in COM 230. But what I'm going to show you about the pen tool can be applied to any pen tool usage. Okay, the pen tool is probably the most difficult tool to learn in Adobe Illustrator, but it's also the most useful. So I really do advise that you spend some time to learn it and to learn it well. It is the most useful tool you're going to find for doing any kind of custom design work. And since that's most of what you guys are all doing in Adobe Illustrator, you really want to learn this tool well. Okay, so I'm going to start off by finding an image of an athlete that I'm going to be tracing. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is find that image. Now I saved one just a little while ago, so I'm going to use File, Place. Okay, I just did a screenshot of it because I wasn't too worried about the resolution or anything, since I'm just using it as a trace. I believe it's that one. Yes. Okay, so here's my athlete. Now I wanted to choose this particular photograph for a couple reasons. One, there's pieces cut off that I'm going to have to hand draw on my own. And two, there's this area between his legs that I'm going to have to cut out. So I want to make sure that you guys can see the method behind doing these types of things. 3, there's an overlap here that I'm going to have to handle. So I also want to show you how to do that. Okay. All right, so first thing I want to do is shrink this down to fit my size. Okay, there's a couple different ways you can shrink. This is just one of them. Okay, you can use your up and down arrow keys. You can hand type one in there. You can also just drag it out. The trouble with dragging it is that you might change the ratio, the up, down, side to side ratio. So you want to make sure that you use your shift key if you're dragging on a corner to rescale this. Okay, so there's a difference here. See, you can mess it up like that. Bad. Never, ever, ever squish an image to make it fit. Okay, or if you hold your shift key down while you do that, no matter what movement you make, it will always keep the aspect ratio correct. Okay, so there's a couple different ways you can scale, but I'm going to use this one. I'm going to go ahead and place it on here. I'm not overly fussy right now about where it's going to go because I'm going to be tracing it and moving it anyway. Okay, so automatically when you open up a new artboard and you start creating, you are on layer 1. Okay, layer 1 is where I'm going to place this photograph. Okay, you can embed your photograph if you always want it to stay linked with this file. I would normally do that if I was creating a brochure, a menu, or something where there's a photograph embedded in the page, like a magazine layout, things like that. In this case, it doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to embed it, only because it's just going to increase my file size, and I don't need to do that. Okay, but what I will do once it's on layer 1 is lock that layer. Once I lock that layer, I can't do anything with this. You see the little not going to happen kind of symbol here? Okay, I can't do anything with this. It's locked it completely. I can't mess it up. Okay, this locking a layer is very useful if you're working on a multi-layer document and you want to be able to edit the background and not the foreground or things like that. Okay, lots of good reasons to use it, but we'll get into that in another lesson. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and create another layer. It will automatically add a layer on top of the layer that you were currently highlighting. Now you can rearrange these layers if you want to. You just click them and move them where you want. Okay, but for this particular purpose, I need my layer 2, which will be my trace, on top of my layer 1, which is my photo. Okay, I can also label these so that I can easily discern them. You can also change the color of the highlight if you want. There's lots of things you can do. You don't have to do any of these, but sometimes it makes it easier. If you're working on a document with, say, 20 layers, you're going to want to label your layers and make sure that the highlight colors are differentiated enough that you can see. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit and have a look at my image. So I'm going to have to create the top of his head. Shouldn't be that hard. Follow his shoulder, his arm. I might simplify his fingers a little bit. I'm not sure. I might keep this finger close to these and just do like a mitt almost for my silhouette. The silhouette for this assignment does need to be fairly simple, so I probably will not follow each one of these folds in his clothes. I'm going to keep it nice and smooth. And I'm going to do this as a couple different pieces. Certainly his head, arms, and upper body. And I think, yeah, I'm going to trace all of this part of his back leg and his foot all as a single object. I'm going to add this leg and foot as a separate object. I'm going to trace it separately and keep it separate from this object here. Okay? Notice I'm calling them objects because at this point it's not a person, it's a series of objects. Okay? Later on it becomes a person when we make it look that way. But for right now we're just tracing an object. And this object can be anything. It can be a flower. It can be a logo part like for the Upper Crust Bakery logo. You can trace a loaf of bread or the Eiffel Tower or just about anything. These are objects that you can trace. And working from a photograph is a great way to do that. All right. So I'm going to go to my pen tool and I can start tracing. Okay. Now before I start tracing with my pen tool, I do want to show you guys a couple basics with the pen tool. So I'm just going to come off to the side of my artboard here. This is on the scratch area. Okay, but I just want to show you some basic things about the pen tool. The pen tool is made up of points and paths. Now if I simply click and then I move my mouse away, it drags with me. I click, I move my mouse away. I can create an object like this. All I'm doing is moving and clicking. And when I get to the end of my object, you might see that little circle pop up. Okay, that means I'm about to close my object. You always want to work with closed objects so that you can add color, gradients, patterns. You can use the Pathfinder tool, pretty much anything. You must have a closed path in order to make most of these things happen. Okay, so this is a very, very simple object created with the pen tool. It uses corner points. Okay, all of these are corner points, and it uses straight paths. Okay, this is a path, this is a path, this is a path. All of these are paths. Okay, now this is different than creating an object using smooth points and curved paths. Okay, and the way that I'm doing this is I am clicking and dragging my mouse and moving away and clicking and dragging my mouse and moving away, clicking and dragging my mouse, moving away. Okay, and again, when I get to that end spot, I want to make sure I click and drag to create that last point of a closed object. So now the difference here is that I have smooth points, which have these direction handles on them, and I have curved paths. Okay, you must have curved paths and smooth points in order to create this drawing of the athlete. Okay, so ultimately this is what you need to do, but it might be worth your time to spend a few minutes with the pen tool just creating something super simple, just so you get a feel for it. Okay, and then once you get a good feel for this, move on to using smooth points and curved paths. And again, doing this, you need your regular pen tool on. You click and drag, you move away. You click and drag and you move away. You click and drag and you move away. Be careful that you haven't circled like this, because then it makes it really hard to mess with it. Okay, so be careful you don't have any overlapping paths like this. You can use your undo key if you need to at any point. Always a favorite tool of pretty much everyone who works in Illustrator. Maybe second to the pen tool, because I do love the pen tool. It's very powerful. Okay, but this is basically how you're going to be starting. Okay, create a few objects, get a feel for how that dragging motion happens. Okay, the way that you can make a curve really smooth, really jagged. There's all different ways to make your object look. But experiment and see what happens with those handles and those direction lines based on how you move your mouse. And remember, when I'm moving my mouse at this point, I'm holding it down at the same time. Okay, so depending on if you're using a trackpad, a mouse, or a pen, all of them can work. You'll have to find the specific methods for your tool. Okay, but for the most part, you click and drag, and you hold down the key on that. All right, now before I move on, I also want to show you something else. I'm going to take this object. Notice I'm using regular selection. This selects your points. This selects your objects. That's actually a pretty big differentiation. Okay, I'm going to show you more about this in a moment, but objects, points. Points on any object. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to shrink it down to about there. And I'm going to bring it over here. And just so that you guys can see it, I'm going to give it a different color. Okay. Now, using my regular selection tool, I'm going to go ahead and select multiple objects just by clicking and dragging around them. You don't even have to get around all of them. You can just do this much and it'll still click and drag around all of them. Or it will select all of them, sorry. Then I'm going to go down to my Pathfinder tools. These are really powerful tools for creating complex objects. We're going to use it a little bit later when I'm creating this cutout in his leg. Okay, but for right now, I just want you to see it with these random objects. There's a couple different ones that you can play with. Two of the most useful is this one called Pathfinder Divide and this one called Shape Exclude. So in this case, I'm going to show you both actually. Here, let me copy and paste so you can see this twice. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to use Shape and Exclude. Pretty simple, right? I have both objects selected. I click on it. This center object is now gone, okay? And it took on the characteristics, black edge or black stroke with a yellow fill for the top object. Now if I click in here, there's nothing here for me to click on. I can't click on it because it doesn't exist. It's like a cookie cutter effect. This is my object. See how that works? Okay, and I can also go to Arrange, Bring to the Front. Okay, so now you can see this object has this hollow area in it. This is super useful when you start creating more complex designs, more complex illustrations. And when I say complex, I don't mean lots and lots of details, because those do not work well for logos. Details are an enemy when it comes to logos. Because if you think about how you're going to shrink these logos down to the size of a postage stamp when it gets onto your business card, you can see you can't really make out a lot of these details anymore. So if you have lots of little details on your objects, it just looks messy. Okay, so don't go too crazy with details on your logo. Simple is your friend. Okay, now the other tool I want to show you is this Pathfinder Divide. So once again, I'm going to be using my regular selection tool. I'm going to select both my objects, and in this case I'm going to use Pathfinder Divide. Now this is a little bit different. What it's done is it's created separate objects here. Now before I can separate these, you'll notice they drag together. Before I can separate these objects, I have to ungroup them. Okay, you can go to Object Ungroup right here, or you can learn the keyboard shortcut, which is what I usually use. Okay, I don't use too many keyboard shortcuts because it's harder for you guys to follow, but there's a couple I use enough that I go ahead and I teach them to you all, and I do use them. Ungroup is definitely one of those. Okay, so now I have two separate objects. I had two objects before, but this object is now cut into this object. Okay, so once again, this is now a hollow object, but I retained the original one. And there are some reasons where you would need to do this. I won't need it for this because I won't really need this little triangle between his legs. But maybe I did need this. Maybe I had plans to do something to this effect. You know, stack it and maybe add a shadow or something. Lots of reasons you might need to use it, okay? But anyway, it's nice sometimes that you can retain this object. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete. I just wanted to make sure I showed you those things before we get started. Okay, so again, these are the Pathfinder tools, Exclude and Divide. So make sure that you are paying attention to which one you're using. I'm sorry, my daughter is here. I'm going to interrupt the demo just for a moment. What do you need, sweetie?
Are you in a Zoom meeting?
I'm recording a meeting, yes. Oh, okay, back to work, sweetie. The joys of working from home. Okay, so anyway, delete this object. I'm going to go ahead and delete this object. Keep in mind that if you want to look at any of your points, if you want to edit any of your points, you simply use your direct selection tool. You click on your object and you can edit them to your heart's delight. Okay, this is a very effective tool. You may not need to do these dramatic. You may just need to change the tiny little bit of a curve. You might need the angle to match a little bit carefully. You'll see me do this on the athlete. When I get the first tracing done, you'll see me go through and fine-tune everything like this. Sometimes when you're doing the first draft, you really can't get it as clean as you want. Quite often you won't, really. So it's nice to be able to go back through and edit. Okay, so you can edit the point as a whole, or you can edit just the handles. Okay. Oh, be careful you don't twist it again like that. Okay, just untwist if you do find that. Okay, but all of the point manipulations that I'm doing, I'm using this direct selection tool. Okay, again, selection is for objects. Direct selection is only for points. Okay, you can also use the pen tool options here, the pen tools. You can click on the add anchor point and you can add a point. Okay, and now these are points just like the other ones. They can be edited the same way, they act the same way, everything's the same. Okay, if you decide you have too many points in your object and it's kind of lumpy bumpy, okay, you can always delete an anchor point. Okay, there's no reason to have both of these here. They don't serve a purpose. I can make one set do both. Okay, so I can just come here and make it a nice smooth curve by doing that. Okay, again, these are not necessary to have two, so I'm going to delete. I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to pull that one down. I'm going to smooth out my points a little bit. okay? And that would more closely match. The last tool on your pen tool pullout is your anchor point convert tool. Looks like a little upside down V, more or less. If you click on that, you will convert your smooth points to square points, or to corner points, sorry. Or you can click and drag, and you will convert your corner points to smooth points. Okay, see how it's twisted? You have to whoops. You have to untwist that, okay? Don't twist it, untwist. All right, so this is just converting my points. And again, once you have these points created, adjusting them is exactly the same as it would have been before. This is a corner point, it has no direction handles. This is a smooth point, it does have direction handles. Okay, and I can alter these as I wish. Okay. This is basic pen tool usage once you have created an object. I want to show you this before I showed you the actual initial trace, because you need to understand how to work with a pen tool even in these abstract forms before you start trying to create an illustration with them. Okay, so practice on techniques and drawings like these just to get a feel for it. Okay, like I said, it really is the hardest tool for people to master, but once you get it, it is so powerful. So please spend the time to learn it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete these. You'll notice I'm still on my direct selection tool. So if I only select that much, this is solid. These are all hollow. If I hit delete right now, I only delete that one object, and this is now an open object. That's a problem, so don't do it that way, okay? If you want to delete objects and you're still on the direct selection tool, you can. You just need to click and drag around everything. Okay, otherwise use your regular selection tool. You can either just click on an object, hold down your shift key and click on another object. You can just click and drag around them. You don't even have to click and drag around all of them as long as you're using the regular selection tool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those. I don't need them. Okay, and now I am ready to begin my trace. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom into my athlete. And like I said before, I'm going to hand draw his head. I'm going to hand draw his leg. I'm going to keep this part of his leg as a separate illustration from everything else. Okay, and I'm going to show you guys a few other tools. Now there are parts of this that are going to be slow and boring to watch, so feel free to fast forward if you're getting bored. I will not be offended, obviously, but I'm going to go ahead and just show you exactly what I do as I'm creating this type of illustration for the assignment. Okay, so feel free to fast forward or rewind, whatever you need to do. Okay, so I'm going to use my pen tool. Okay, you can access it here or here. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go ahead and start at the top of his head. I may not get it completely correct the first time, but that's okay. I have time to adjust. Okay. Okay, and again, you do not have to follow this illustration perfectly with all these folds and everything, okay? And don't worry about getting it perfect the first time. Right now it has a white fill. I'm going to change that to an orange fill. I'm also going to change, hang on just a sec, I'm going to go back and restart this. Opacity, I'm going to drop that down so you can see this a little more easily. Okay, I'm going to give it no fill, I'm going to give it an orange stroke. This is just temporary. Okay, just to make it a little bit easier for you all. Okay. I have a feeling I'm not going to like the shape of his head. I'm going to have to fix it later. That's okay. All right. So again, I'm just going to start moving around. I don't want too many points because too many points makes this harder to edit and it makes it lumpy bumpy. Okay. And you may not need to be as perfect with this illustration as you might think. Okay. Simple illustrations generally work better. Okay, I could do this wrist bump here, but I don't really see the value in it right now. If it winds up looking weird later, I can always add it. Okay, and I'm not going to do his finger opening here. I'm going to keep it close. So again, this is something I'm going to have to kind of hand draw and kind of adjust myself. Okay. And again, don't worry about getting it perfect. You got time. You can edit all you need. So I'm just going to move around his hand. And edit. He's a very slender guy. I might make him a little bit heavier later. I'm not sure. Though my daughter's a runner and she is a slim little creature, let me tell you. Okay. So sometimes I do want that sharp corner, so I'm just clicking. I'm not clicking and dragging. I did that on the fingertips too. Okay, but for the most part, I click and drag. Okay, I'm going to take it in for his waistline. I'm not going to worry about following the curves in the clothing. There's no point. Get his butt down to his leg. Okay, now I'm not going to delineate the shorts that he's wearing. I'm just doing a silhouette of his leg. So I have to kind of use a little of anatomy work here. I got a couple ways I can do this. I can draw the whole leg and then cut this in, but I think it's going to be easier to do it differently. Do I want to cut that? There's a couple ways. I'll show you guys a couple anyway. Actually, I might do that leg as a separate object. All right, yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, now we're getting to the part where I'm going to have to figure out what the shoe might look like. I mean, I have an example right here, obviously, and I kind of know what a shoe looks like. I think most of us do. Okay, and again, you're not going to get it perfect the first time. Your toes might be obnoxiously long or something. I've seen some of my shoe illustrations in the past and they're pretty funky looking, but that's okay. Okay, we have time to fix this. You are not expected to get this correct 100% the first time out. Okay. Yeah. Okay, golly. See, all my reminders come up. I should have turned those off. Okay, so now here again, I'm going to have to imagine his knee and the top of his leg. It won't matter much if I don't get it right because it's going to be covered up with this foot and leg anyway, so who cares, right? Okay, and again, I'm not putting shorts on him because it's just a silhouette, so I have to imagine. Okay, and I'm going to do this leg separate, so this is going to look weird. I'm like basically taking his leg off here, but it's just temporary until I get the other one built in. Okay, and this one again, since I'm not putting clothing on him in a silhouette, you don't need to. I'm just going to estimate where his body would be. Okay, and this arm will also be separate because I'm going to separate it with his chest here. So I'm going to go ahead and move up and here. Get under his chin. Okay, faces can be a little tricky. If you follow every little nook and cranny of a face, it turns out lumpy bumpy. So go ahead and start by doing that if you need to. But you will probably want to eliminate some of those lumps and bumps. Even though most runners would run with an open mouth, the illustration will often look a little funky if you do that. So we may make them a closed mouth runner. Sometimes artistic license is important. Okay, and this little nook here on his forehead, I'm also going to smooth that out just to simplify a drawing so that it's nice and clean and easy to work with. Okay, too much detail in a logo or a symbol is not your friend. I'm going to have to adjust that too. Okay, but it does give me the basic outline of his body. And now I can do this arm as a separate object. So I'm just going to deselect everything, go back to my pen tool, and I'm going to do this arm. So there's a couple ways of doing this. The simplest one, and I think it's the one that I would like you guys to try first, is to just simply marry this curve with a matching curve on the arm part. There are better ways to do this, but for right now, I want you guys just to focus on getting a nice clean path. We'll worry about other techniques for doing that a little bit later. Okay, I will go through some of that when I do the logo demos. I'm not sure if I'll hold those live or do demonstrations such as this one. Sometimes the live ones are really hard for you all to get to because of work and family and school obligations and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes these work a lot better. Okay, so now again, I have to choose, am I going to make this a closed hand, closing this finger in with the others, or am I going to leave it open? I close the other one. I kind of want to leave this one open. And I will probably have to edit these anyway because it's going to look a little clumpy. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and give him an open finger shape to his hand. And you notice I get a few more details on the hands. This is probably going to have to be simplified and smoothed out and everything else. I can already see it's kind of funky looking. But again, this is a starting point. Please don't worry about getting this perfect right off the bat. You're going to get frustrated with yourself and you're not going to want to continue. It's important to just get a rough outline right now, and then you will smooth it out and the next step. Okay, so now I have two objects created. One is his main torso and leg, his back leg, and one is just his hand. Okay, or sorry, arm and hand I should say. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and do this leg. I will eventually connect these and probably disconnect this, so I'm going to show you guys how to do that in a moment. But just for grins, let's go ahead and continue his leg. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, that's going to be hard for you guys to follow. Now, I'll do it separately. I don't want to make this harder for you all. Okay, so I'm going to start. I'm going to outline all of this. Okay. But I was going to show you guys how to, well, I was going to show you guys how to cut this piece out. But I did show that to you on those random shapes earlier. So it doesn't really make sense to do it here as well because I've already started the drawing as separate objects. Okay, let's just go ahead and continue. And then we'll do it as we need to. Pretty much everything in Illustrator can be done in multiple ways. There's not one way to do really anything. Just the way they have it set up, there are multiple ways to do almost any technique. So makes it better for those of us who don't like following all the rules all the time. Oh, why am I doing the top of that? Hang on. Sorry. I'm just going to leave that as a single object. His shoe doesn't have to be a separate delineation. If it was a logo for a shoe company, I probably would, obviously. I'd probably put a lot more detail on that shoe for that matter. But in this case, we're just doing the silhouette of an athlete. Doesn't matter what his shoes are. Okay, so up here, I'm just going to overlap these. I'm going to try and match my path here, because I will join these together in a few minutes. Okay, coming through here in his ankle, bumping out for the shoe, the heel, and then finally connecting. Okay. Okay, so I have all the basics of my athlete done here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the photo just for a moment so you guys can see what this looks like without the picture behind it. This is when you can really start to see what you need to adjust. Obviously the hands are kind of funky. They're going to need some cleanup. The shape of his head, I'm going to have to pull his forehead out a little bit. It looks a little sloped in. This arm looks really thin to me compared to the rest of them, so I'm going to probably beef that up just a little bit. This foot is smaller than this one, so I'll make some adjustments there. And then I'm going to join these pieces together too. Alright, so first thing I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and select all my objects. I'm going to fill them instead of outline them. Okay, so this is the first step. Okay, now this object I already know is separate from this object. I'm going to use my Pathfinder tools to cut these apart. Okay, there's a couple ways of doing this. Again, this is the one I'm going to choose for this one, okay, because I want to show you guys a few things. Okay, so I'm just going to click divide. I've selected both of these objects. I didn't select this because I don't need to, but I did select both of these objects. and then I can hit divide. Remember, when you use divide, you have to ungroup your objects so you can move them. Okay, so now I have this object. I have this object. Okay, you see how that's all kind of funkied up? Okay, then hang on a sec, this is going to be harder to read. There we go. Okay, so now you can see all these different pieces. See this tiny little sliver, this one, this one. Okay, so first thing I have to do is connect all my pieces together. So both of these pieces of the foot, I'm going to use my shift key and I'm going to select both of those. I'm also going to select this main leg here. And I'm going to use this one, which is unite. So it's going to become one solid object. Okay. Now I'm also going to do the same thing. I'm going to connect this leg and his main body together. Same thing. Okay, you'll notice this is still a separate piece. So I have to use my shift key, select everything else, and connect them together. Okay, so now I have all of this, which is a single piece, and then I have this leg separate. Okay, I also have this arm separate. Now, you see how I have this line here separated them? I'm going to do the same thing down here, but I'm just going to do it manually instead. Okay, I'm just going to use my keys to do that little shift there. Okay, and it's starting to come. Okay, it's starting to come together here. So now I need to go back and I need to adjust these paths to make them look more natural and just smoother and with far fewer points. There are way too many points here to work with. Okay, it's just messy looking, especially in parts like the elbow and the face and the fingers. So there are some tools out there that you can use to automate a simplifying of a path. I don't really recommend these because they aren't really highly controllable. So for some things it works well, for others it really doesn't. You see how it starts just degrading or eroding the shape of this person. Okay, it takes away an individual look to him, and I don't want to do that. Now there are occasions when you would want to simplify it to that point. But in this case, I really don't care for the look, so I'm going to do this manually instead. I just think it looks a lot cleaner. Okay, so I'm going to go out of that. So this is my original drawing. I think I'm also going to separate right here, because if I'm doing it here and here, I think it's going to look a lot cleaner. So I'm going to go and do that in a few moments too. There's a couple other tools you can use to do that. All right, let's check his head first. His head definitely is a little lumpy bumpy up here. So this is when I'm going to start using my direct selection tool, and I'm going to start smoothing out his head shape. I also, for whatever reason, oops, you can use your arrow keys here to move the entire point, or there's a lot of different ways you can do this, and it really is another one of those situations where you just have to do it to get used to it. It does get easier in time, I promise. It gets to the point where it's really all about muscle memory. That's why I can talk and do this at the same time, because I've done it enough that I have developed the muscle memory behind using this tool. Okay, and it comes a lot quicker than you might think. So be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to mess up, because you're going to do that. And it will get better in time, I promise. And we don't need quite as pointy of a nose. Okay, now this is where I can decide. I don't like that though. Oops. Open mouth, closed mouth. It's actually not bad right now. That turned out better than it often does. And again, there's a certain amount of artistic license here. So I'm going to keep him as an open mouth runner. But I want to make that chin a little more clear. Don't like those last two moves I did. That looks better. Okay. So here, I don't like this sharp corner. I can just eliminate this most likely. And then I can use this to create that curve for his neck. Okay, again, simplify, simplify, simplify. Looks better when you do. Okay, I could even probably delete this one, quite frankly. Let's delete this one. And then just use these 2 points to create the top of his head. It's smoother, it's cleaner, and it looks better in a silhouette form, which is what you guys are working on. Okay, don't be afraid to mess up. You will. It's okay. Easy enough to fix. Okay, it's how you're going to learn this tool is by screwing it up and having to fix it. Okay. I'm going to make his arm, oops, just a tiny bit thicker. I'm really just using the arrow key here more than anything. But there will be a time when I need to fine-tune this in another way. Okay, so I'm going to pull this down a little. Okay, so again, artistic license, I might need to adjust that further. Okay, so again, just adjusting these points, rounding out curves, smoothing out curves, eliminating excess lines. I like the way his thumb looks here. Down to his wrist is fine. I'm not super pumped about this. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to add a point right here. Whoops. Convert that point. Still not super pumped about this hand. It's okay, but it's not fantastic. And I don't expect you guys to spend hours and hours and hours when you guys are doing this, okay? Please do the best work you possibly can, because I really need to see that you guys can master this, because this is how you're going to be creating your logos, is using this pen tool. So take the time to learn it and to use it well, but don't panic about getting everything absolutely perfect. If I can see that you guys have used both corner and smooth points, and you've really made an effort to be, you know, to have a level of fidelity with the illustration, but you've also taken some artistic license where you've needed to simplify and clean it up, that's awesome, okay? There will also be another announcement that kind of talks about this a little bit more as well. Okay, pretty happy with that. This is an extra one I don't need. Delete that. Let's smooth this one out. Okay. Alright, gonna have to split that apart, so I'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, this foot's a little weird looking, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjust his toe out. That's a little off. This needs to be smoothed out. Yeah, Creative Cloud. God, they update every other day. Yeah, if you guys are on auto update, it might drive you crazy. So you might want to turn auto update off on your Creative Cloud subscription, so that you just do it manually when you're ready to. That's particularly important for anyone who's got limited bandwidth. You don't want to be messing with auto update every other day. It just will drive you crazy. Okay, that's not bad. I'm not super pumped about the shape of the foot right now, but I'll go back and fix that. That one definitely needs some fine-tuning. Let's come up here though first. Okay, That is not gonna work. A little artistic license there. That's okay. All right, that actually looks pretty decent. I kind of like that knee, actually. I'm not going to mess with it too much. It's a little more detail than I probably would have done usually, but it's turning out pretty clean, so I'm going to leave it alone. I don't know if I want to go in here. Actually, it looks weird if I don't. Okay. Let me, oh yeah, this one definitely needs some work. Got a little funky thumb thing going here. All right, so let's first move this out a little. Smooth this out. You'll notice that smaller curves are lumpier than longer direction lines or handles will give you a smoother curve. And again, a lot of this is muscle memory on my part, okay? I've just done this enough that I understand what I need to do kind of without thinking. It will get there for anyone that works with this tool enough. You will get there. It's just how our brains kind of work. Okay, but as you're looking, I'm hoping you guys are able to see why I'm making some of the changes that I am, and how the adjustments are working on the pen tool. This is definitely a disaster, so we'll definitely clean that sucker up. Okay, I'm gonna smooth that out a bit. He's got long pinky fingers, actually, based on that trace. He's got long pinky fingers. All right, now let's get a cleaner look to his ring finger here. Okay, remember all of this is using the direct selection tool up here, okay? You cannot do this by editing entire objects. This is for editing points, and that is definitely what we're doing here. Trying to even out the size of his fingers here a little bit so that they're not super different. That middle finger is still a little thicker than I want it to be. Oops. Undo is your friend. Okay, I'm gonna have to adjust this separately. I'm going to add a point here. I almost never add points, but sometimes you do need to pull that out so I can still maintain the curve up here that I want. Okay, it's getting closer. I'm going to select those points and lift it up a little bit. And the way I did that was just use my direct selection, but I drew a circle or rectangle bounding box around the points that I wanted to adjust, and then I just used my keyboard to go up and down with it. It still doesn't look right, does it? Okay, and when you guys are working on this, please feel free to take breaks. Okay, like I said, almost everybody has a love-hate relationship with this tool when they first start using it. So when you start getting super frustrated, put it away, come back to it later. And yeah, it's a whole lot easier on your mental health that way. Because yeah, this tool will drive you crazy when you're first starting to use it. It's a tough tool to use, and that's just how it is. Alright, I'm pretty happy with this silhouette. The only thing I want to do is separate the leg right here so that it separates away from that, from the shoe, the leg from the shoe. Same as I did here. I'm just going to do it again. Okay, so in this case, there's a couple ways I can do this. I think the easiest way is going to be using the blob brush tool. Blob brush is pretty helpful. You can see the size of the brush here is pretty huge right now, so we definitely want to take that down to something smaller. Okay, it's currently at 7. I'm going to do this like at 2, maybe. Okay, now the blob brush will actually create solid objects, which sometimes is useful and sometimes is not. The only reason this is going to work for this is because I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool after. So what I'm really doing is just creating a line, a white line to separate the shoe from the leg. And I'm going to have to see how cleanly I can do this. Okay, not too bad. So now I have this white blob, okay, and just for grins, I'm going to make it blue so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm going to use this object to separate the pieces of this object here. Okay, so a couple things I need to do first is move it so that I'm not messing up this, because I kind of like that. I can go ahead and do this. And I'm going to have to adjust anyway, so I'm just getting a rough look at this. Okay, but you can see that using the blob brush has given me this blob, basically. It's an elongated blob. I'm going to use my regular selection tool. I'm going to select my blue blob, and I'm going to select my orange body out object, and I'm going to use my exclude. Okay, now you'll see what happens on here. It's going to get rid of some of these parts, but not all of these parts. Okay, so have a look. Actually, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this better. Okay, so I'm going to use exclude. Okay, it automatically takes the top color and applies it. That's fine, not a big deal. I can just go in here and select my color. But you'll see that it left these little pieces over here. Okay, I don't want those. Okay, they don't serve a purpose. I don't need them. So I have to delete those. And there's multiple ways that you guys can do this. Okay, the easiest way is just to use direct selection, click on the object, and hit delete. Okay, sometimes you'll need to hit delete twice if you don't select all the points. Okay, so what I have now, okay, this blue blob in the middle, which separated into 3 pieces, it's gone completely. Okay, so now I have this one orange object here, and this is a separate orange object. So now all I gotta do is clean up my curves and stuff here. Okay, and I might need to add some points, or there's all kinds of things I could do here. Okay, so first I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to add a point for the back of his heel. I'm just going to move this one down a little bit because it kind of works for me. This one, I have to pull off that handle. You'll see how this handle here is kind of practically overlapped and it's kind of a mess. Ditto here. Okay, sometimes you have to manually fix these things. You'll also see that they're separate. Sometimes you want these handles to be separate, and you can use the Option key to separate pieces. Okay, the easiest way to get them back together is just really to convert the point. So that's the back of my shoe. I'm going to bulge it out a little bit. I'm going to pull that down a little bit. So the back of the ankle needs to go in a bit. Okay, too many points here for sure. Just going to delete that point altogether. Going to convert this point so that it's nice and clean. Nice, clean, smooth curve. All right. Not bad. Coming along. Still have to mess with this one, obviously. Not super pumped about that. Okay, that's a little harsh. All right, coming along nicely. Okay, so now there's a couple ways. I don't want to show you that one yet. It's just too much. I'm just going to continue and do this by hand. There are other ways to create a nice clean separation between color fields, which you'll need to do on your logos. I will explain this to you using logos, but for this, I don't want to do too much. If you guys just learn how to master this pen tool and do all these movements manually, you'll be a lot better off, okay? So this is not the quickest or the easiest way to do it, but it is the best way for you guys to learn right now, okay? Okay, and I'm not going to worry if you guys don't get this absolutely perfect. I just want you guys to know how to use this pen tool really, really well. Okay, it is such a valuable tool to you. And you guys can worry about getting all your curves perfect as you get a bit more advanced in the software. Okay, that's probably close enough for what you guys need to do. All right, so this is looking pretty decent. There's a few things I would still work on to try and smooth out and clean up, but it looks pretty good right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and, well, I can turn that on just to show you what it looks like. It's fairly good fidelity wise, but I certainly took some artistic license on the shoe and on the leg, created parts. I took his clothes off basically, no offense to you, young man. Smoothed out his head, or gave him a head really, because that was absent in the first picture, and just clarified his hands a little bit more. Okay, I am done with the photograph, so I can unlock that and I can delete the entire layer. I just don't need it. Okay, yes I do. Alright, so this is what I'm left with. Now when you guys are working with this, you've been asked to put these on a color background and to make symbols out of them. First thing I want to do actually is take him, move him off, and decide what shape my symbol will be. Okay, I think for this case I'm going to make it a rounded rectangle. Just personal choice. You don't have to follow that on yours. Do what you think is right. Okay, if your rounded rectangle, if you don't like the curves on the corners, you can use your up and down arrow keys to make those curves softer or harder. Okay, I want to keep this nice and friendly, very humanized, so I'm going to use a deeper curve. Okay, and it will use whatever color you have selected, obviously, and you can change that as you wish. Okay, I'm kind of fussy. I like everything centered and clean looking. Okay, so this is going to be the background color of my symbol. Now, it's almost automatic for people to do an outline and then place an object in an outline shape, but it's not as recognizable as doing a silhouette against a solid background. Okay, so let me unlock this. I'm going to lock that. So I'm going to go ahead and change him to a white silhouette. Whoops, I'm going to have to delete that piece. I'm going to pull him over here. I'm going to change, whoops, I'm going to drag my layers differently. There we go. I'm going to shrink him down a little bit because he's a little too big right now for my purpose. Okay, give him some space to run into. Okay, so that basically means I don't want to center it in this case because it'll look too crowded by not having any space over here. Okay, so you'll see there's more space here than there is between here. Okay, it just looks more realistic. All right, coming along. Okay, so now I need to take this object, which I didn't even realize I still had, and I'm just going to delete that. Okay. So now I have my white objects on my orange background. I've left some nice lead room. I have fairly smooth curves. I've separated my objects. You don't have to separate your objects, but it does look better if you do. Okay, it's also a good technique to practice because once you do your logos, you have to use the background color to separate your color fields in order to get a nice clean looking logo. So it's a good technique to go ahead and practice now. All right, some people will add like some kind of object or a shadow or something to make it look like he's standing on something, and you're certainly welcome to do that if you wish. You can also take these white objects and this orange object. In this case, they're going to be merged to a single layer. They won't stay separately. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and grab them, and I'm going to use my Option key to make an identical copy over here. Using the Option key, I still have my orange object. See how the red highlight is here? And I still have my white objects with the blue outline or the blue stroke. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep this in case I need it, because what I'm going to do next is going to destroy that. So now I'm going to grab both of these, and I'm going to use my Exclude tool. Okay, I'm going to ungroup my objects. Okay, then I'm going to only select this background. So now I have these shapes are cut out of this background. Okay, so I have a single blue object here, and I don't have any white objects on this page now. They've been cut out. Okay, and you can see that when I come over here. Okay, so now you can see that this has been cut out. It's like a cookie cutter effect. Okay. And again, generally speaking, this is all you would want to do for a symbol. You want to keep it nice and simple, nice and easy to read. But for other applications, you might choose to do this cookie cutter technique and perhaps put a very subtle shadow on it. I always find their default shadow really heavy, so I tend to lighten it up quite a bit. Okay, you can even, do note if you're working in inches, just how small this offset is with this 6" by 6" artboard. Okay, a lot of people will come in here and put a 1 or something, but if you do that, it looks like it disappears. Okay, especially if your blur is high as well. I mean, it just gets to the point where you're like, what the heck am I doing? Okay, just be careful, because now anywhere you click, even if you're not clicking on this object, if you click anywhere near that shadow, especially if it's blurred out to a point where it's almost transparent, you'll still be clicking on this object. So if all else fails, you can undo, or another useful window is Appearance. And whatever object you have selected with your regular selection tool, you can go down and find if you have a shadow in there which you didn't know about, and you can just delete it. Okay. Oops. Hang on. Cancel. Okay. Just highlight and click on the little trash can. Okay. Good way of fixing things, because sometimes people will say, I thought I had a shadow, but I can't see it because it is so blurred out and it's so spread out that it's transparent. But then they're clicking all over their screen and they're still clicking on the object because they're clicking on this shadow that's invisible, basically. So it gets really confusing if you're not careful on that note. All right, so that is basically the exercise. I believe you guys are doing 4 for this exercise. So you just saw that it took me, I don't know, 40 minutes or so to do the 1. Okay, it will take you guys some time to do this, so please give yourself ample time. You must get this right. I will have you redo it if you don't get it clean enough. Okay, so get nice clean curves, because it's really going to hold you back on the rest of the assignments this entire term if you don't master this pen tool. So I will make you redo this assignment if they aren't smooth enough. Okay, I'm not doing that to be mean. I'm trying to do this so that you can master the tool. Okay, it's really important that you master this one. All right, I hope this has been helpful to COM 230, 229, and any other students that may be using Adobe Illustrator. Those are the 2 main courses that are using it that I teach right now anyway. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful, and I will be posting this to YouTube, and I'll send it out to you all in an announcement. All right, thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.